In a city divided by blue uniforms and protest signs, Aaliyah Daniels was the last person anyone expected to defend Officer Ryan Calloway. At 17, she'd witnessed enough injustice to know which side she was supposed to choose. But when evidence crossed her desk at the legal aid office where she volunteered after school, bodycam footage contradicting accusations, reports with suspicious edits, witnesses pressured into silence, something inside her rebelled against the convenient narrative. "This is wrong," she whispered, reviewing files late into the night while her grandmother made worried calls to relatives. The morning Ryan's court-appointed lawyer abandoned him, citing political realities. Aaliyah slipped into the back of the courtroom, heart hammering against her ribs. She hadn't planned the words that erupted from her lips when the judge asked who would represent the disgraced officer. She certainly hadn't anticipated the cost of standing between a man and a system determined to make him its sacrifice. But Aaliyah Daniels came from a long line of people who recognized truth when they saw it and refused to look away no matter the price. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The morning air was thick with anticipation as Aaliyah Daniels pinned her curly hair back with practiced fingers. At 17, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly where she was headed in life. Her bedroom walls were plastered with law school brochures, Howard, Columbia, Yale, dreams that felt both impossibly distant and inevitable. "Aaliyah, you're gonna be late for that volunteer thing." Her grandmother's voice floated up the stairs of their modest Atlanta home. "Coming, Grandma," Aaliyah called back, grabbing her backpack and the coffee-stained legal pad she'd been scribbling notes on last night. Downstairs, Grandma Daniels stood at the stove, spatula in hand. At 65, Elaine Daniels moved with the energy of a woman 20 years younger, her silver-streaked hair pulled into a tight bun. "I made you breakfast," she said, sliding a plate of eggs across the counter. "No time," Aaliyah replied, snagging a piece of toast instead. "Mr. Thompson said I could sit in on client interviews today at the legal aid office." Her grandmother's face softened. "Always in a rush to save the world." "Just trying to understand it first," Aaliyah replied, kissing her grandmother's cheek. Outside, the Atlanta summer heat hit her like a wall. As she walked to the bus stop, Aaliyah scrolled through news alerts on her phone. The neighborhood was tense after Officer Blake Wilson had been caught on video roughing up a teenager last week during an arrest. The video had gone viral, sparking outrage and planned protests. At the legal aid office, a converted Victorian house with peeling paint and an oversized American flag, Mr. Thompson was already reviewing cases. The white-haired lawyer looked up as she entered. "Aaliyah, perfect timing. There's a community meeting about the Wilson incident tonight. Thought you might want to observe." "Definitely," she nodded, dropping her backpack on an empty chair. The day passed in a blur of paperwork and phone calls. Aaliyah absorbed everything. The way Mr. Thompson spoke to clients, how he translated legal jargon into plain English, the quiet dignity he maintained even when delivering bad news. This was what she wanted. To understand the law so deeply, she could make it work for people who needed it most. By evening, the community center was packed. Aaliyah squeezed into a seat in the back, notebook ready. The meeting started calmly, enough, with community leaders discussing peaceful protest strategies for the weekend. That's when she first noticed Officer Ryan Calloway. Unlike the other officers lining the walls, he wasn't standing at rigid attention. There was something in his posture, a slight tilt forward, like he was genuinely listening. A white cop, probably in his mid-30s, with short brown hair and lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled more than frowned. He caught her studying him and nodded slightly. Aaliyah quickly looked away, embarrassed to be caught staring. As the meeting progressed, voices grew louder. Someone shouted that all cops were the same, corrupt, racist, violent. Officer Callaway didn't flinch, didn't argue back. He just kept listening, his expression neutral but attentive. "That's Ryan Callaway," whispered the elderly woman beside Aaliyah. "Not like the others. My grandson got picked up last year. Nothing serious, just being in the wrong place." Officer Callaway made sure he got home safe instead of throwing him in a cell. Aaliyah tucked this information away, curious despite herself. After the meeting, she lingered outside, watching the crowd disperse. Tomorrow's protest was scheduled to start at the courthouse and march through downtown. She planned to be there, not just to support the cause, but to observe the legal observers who would be monitoring police conduct. Saturday dawned bright and clear. Aaliyah arrived early, helping volunteers distribute water bottles and write emergency legal numbers on people's arms. The energy was electric, hundreds of people gathering with signs and determined faces. The march began peacefully. Aaliyah stayed toward the middle of the crowd, phone ready to document anything important. She spotted Officer Calloway again, part of the police line but without riot gear, unlike most of his colleagues. 3 blocks in, everything changed. A group of counter-protesters appeared, blocking the route. Tensions escalated quickly. Someone threw a water bottle, then another. The crowd surged forward, then backward as police moved in. Aaliyah found herself caught in a crush of bodies. Panic rose in her throat as she struggled to stay upright. Then a strong hand gripped her arm, pulling her sideways out of the worst of the press. It was Officer Callaway. "You okay?" he asked, creating a small buffer space for her with his body. Aaliyah nodded, too startled to speak. He'd pulled her to relative safety, positioning himself between her and the surging crowd. "Stay here a minute until it thins out," he said, before turning his attention back to the crowd. Instinctively, Aaliyah raised her phone and began recording. Just in time to capture what happened next, a white counter-protester, red-faced and shouting, broke through the line and lunged toward a young black woman holding a sign. Officer Callaway moved quickly, stepping between them. The man hurled slurs and spit, his anger now directed at the officer. "Get out of my way, pig. These animals need to be taught a lesson." Officer Callaway didn't raise his voice or draw his weapon. Instead, he used his body as a barrier, firmly but without excessive force, guiding the man back behind the police line, speaking too quietly for Aaliyah to hear. The moment passed quickly, but Aaliyah had captured it all: the slurs, the de-escalation, the controlled restraint. Later that night, scrolling through her footage, Aaliyah paused on Officer Callaway's face. There was something there, not fear, not anger, but a kind of resigned determination. It didn't fit the narrative she'd grown up with about police officers, especially white ones. Curious, she began searching online for information about him. Ryan Calloway, 34, 8 years on the force. A clean record. But then something more interesting. His name appeared in a newspaper article from 2 years ago, mentioned briefly as one of 3 officers who had filed formal complaints about excessive force used by a superior. The case had been settled quietly, the superior transferred but not fired. Aaliyah sat back, frowning. Maybe Officer Callaway wasn't what she expected. The next week, Atlanta was buzzing with protest stories. Most were peaceful, but there had been arrests, injuries. Aaliyah was back at the legal aid office, helping compile witness statements when Mr. Thompson turned up the volume on the small TV in the corner. Breaking news: Atlanta police officer charged with assault on protester. Officer Ryan Calloway has been suspended pending investigation. Aaliyah's head snapped up. The news showed a grainy cell phone video of a protester being shoved to the ground, the officer's face not clearly visible. The reporter explained that the incident had allegedly occurred during Saturday's protest, after the main march had dispersed. "That can't be right," Aaliyah murmured, pulling out her phone to review her own footage. She'd seen Officer Calloway that day. He hadn't been aggressive with anyone. Over the next few days, the story snowballed. More videos surfaced, most too blurry or distant to be conclusive, but the narrative had already formed. Callaway had become the department's sacrificial lamb, thrown to the wolves of public opinion to show they were taking misconduct seriously. Nobody from the department defended him publicly. His union representative gave tepid statements about waiting for all the facts. Online, people who'd never met him declared him guilty, another bad cop finally exposed. Aaliyah couldn't shake her discomfort. The man she'd observed and researched didn't match the monster being described in news reports. When she learned his first court appearance was scheduled for Friday, she decided to attend. The courtroom was nearly empty. A preliminary hearing rarely drew crowds. Officer Callaway sat alone at the defense table, his shoulders hunched, looking nothing like the confident officer she'd seen at the protest. Beside him sat a harried-looking public defender who kept checking his watch. The proceedings were brief. The judge, an older white man with a perpetual frown, set a trial date and discussed bail. Callaway's lawyer barely spoke, except to recommend his client accept a plea deal. "The department is offering administrative leave instead of termination if you plead guilty to a lesser charge," the lawyer said, loud enough for Aaliyah to hear from her seat in the back. "It's the best you're going to get." Officer Calloway stared straight ahead, his face a mask. "I didn't do what they're saying I did." The lawyer sighed. "Nobody cares what actually happened. Take the deal." As they stood to leave, Callaway turned slightly and his eyes met Aaliyah's. There was no recognition, just a fleeting moment of contact before he looked away. But in that moment, something shifted inside her. This wasn't justice. This was expediency, politics, convenience. "This is wrong," she whispered to herself, the words barely audible, and with those 3 words, the trajectory of her life began to change. The courthouse steps were slick with afternoon rain when Aaliyah spotted Officer Ryan Calloway exiting alone, collar turned up against the drizzle. His lawyer had already disappeared, hustling to another case without so much as a goodbye. "Officer Calloway," she called, jogging to catch up to him. He turned, confusion crossing his face when he recognized her. "You're the girl from the protest, the one in the crowd." "Aaliyah Daniels," she said, extending her hand. When he didn't take it, she awkwardly lowered it. "I saw what happened that day. The real story, not what they're saying on the news." Ryan's eyes darted around, as if looking for witnesses to their conversation. "Look, I appreciate the thought, but you should stay out of this. It's complicated. I have footage," she pressed on, "of you that day. You were de-escalating, not escalating." A flicker of hope crossed his face before he shut it down. "Doesn't matter. Department's made up its mind." "But the truth matters," Aaliyah insisted. Ryan laughed bitterly. "Kid, truth is the first casualty in situations like this. Go home. Forget about me." He walked away, shoulders hunched against more than just the rain. Aaliyah stood watching him, the seed of an idea already taking root in her mind. That evening, Grandma Elaine found her granddaughter surrounded by printouts of legal documents and news articles at the kitchen table. "Something's got you fired up," she observed, setting down a mug of tea beside Aaliyah's elbow. Aaliyah explained what she'd witnessed, what she was discovering about Officer Calloway, and the injustice unfolding. Her grandmother listened without interrupting, her weathered face thoughtful. When Aaliyah finished, she sat down across from her. "Baby girl, I need you to think hard about what you're considering," she said gently. "Taking a white officer's side, even if you're right, it's gonna make some people in our community look at you sideways. But if he's innocent, I'm not saying don't do it, I'm saying understand what it'll cost." Her grandmother's eyes were kind but serious. "Your daddy stood up for what was right too, even when it wasn't popular. It's in your blood." Aaliyah swallowed hard at the mention of her father, a civil rights attorney who died when she was 8. "I just want to make sure the system works like it's supposed to." Her grandmother patted her hand. "Then do what you need to do. Just be prepared for the pushback." Later that night, Aaliyah reviewed the bodycam footage that had been released to the public. She'd watched it a dozen times, but something kept nagging at her. She slowed the video down, frame by frame, focusing on the background rather than on Ryan and the protester. There, in the corner of the frame, a reflection in a storefront window showed another officer, one whose face wasn't visible in the main footage. As the alleged assault occurred, this officer's arm was extended out of the main camera's view. It wasn't Callaway, she whispered to herself. He was being blocked by that other officer. The next day at the legal aid office, Aaliyah shared her discovery with Mr. Thompson. The older man reviewed the footage carefully, his bushy eyebrows rising in surprise. "You've got a good eye, Aaliyah," he said finally. "Most lawyers would have missed this detail. So you think I'm right? Officer Callaway is being framed?" Mr. Thompson removed his glasses, polishing them thoughtfully. "I think you found reasonable doubt at minimum. Have you shown this to Officer Callaway's attorney?" "Not yet. I tried talking to Officer Callaway, but he brushed me off. Can't blame him. A black teenager offering to help a white cop? Not exactly a common scenario." Mr. Thompson smiled slightly. "But you've always had an uncommon sense of justice." Encouraged, Aaliyah created a carefully worded social media post that evening, sharing her enhanced footage and analysis. She didn't declare Ryan innocent or guilty. She simply pointed out what the evidence actually showed versus what was being claimed. The response was immediate and intense. Some praised her, attention to detail and courage. Others accused her of being a traitor to her community, a cop lover, even a naive child being manipulated. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications, many supportive, others frighteningly hostile. By morning, her post had been shared thousands of times. Local news stations were trying to contact her. Her grandmother fielded calls, protecting her from the sudden onslaught of attention. Then came the news that changed everything. Ryan Calloway's lawyer had withdrawn from the case, citing irreconcilable differences with his client, code for political pressure becoming too intense. Aaliyah found out when she received a text from an unknown number. "You still want to help? I need to talk to you. RC." They met at a quiet diner miles from both their neighborhoods. Ryan looked worse than before. Unshaven, eyes bloodshot, the weight of his situation visible in the slump of his shoulders. "Your video analysis," he said without preamble. "You're right. It wasn't me who shoved that protester. It was Officer Mercer, but he was standing behind me from the camera's angle. Why would he do that?" Ryan stared into his coffee. "Because I've reported him twice before, for excessive force. This was payback, and the department's happier to sacrifice me than admit they've kept a problem officer on the force." "Have you told your lawyer this?" "Had," Ryan corrected bitterly. "He quit last night, said the case was too politically charged. Now, truth is, the police union made it clear he shouldn't defend me too vigorously." Aaliyah's mind raced. There must be other lawyers who would take this on. "With what money?" Ryan laughed hollowly. "I'm suspended without pay. My savings are going to my ex-wife and daughter. No lawyer wants to touch this pro bono, not with the department, the union, and half the city wanting my head." Aaliyah stared at him, an impossible idea forming. "When's your next hearing?" "Tomorrow. Just a status update, but without representation." He trailed off. "I'll be there," she said firmly. The next day, Aaliyah arrived at the courthouse early, dressed in her most professional outfit, a navy blazer borrowed from her grandmother and a white blouse she saved for special occasions. Her hair was pulled back severely, her expression composed despite the butterflies in her stomach. The courtroom was more crowded this time. News of Ryan's abandoned defense had spread, and people were curious to see the fallen officer face the judge alone. When his case was called, Ryan stood, visibly nervous. "I see your counsel is not present, Officer Callaway," remarked the judge, a black woman in her 60s with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Do you have new representation?" Ryan cleared his throat. "No, Your Honor. My lawyer withdrew from the case. I'm currently seeking—" "I will defend him." The words burst from Aaliyah before she could reconsider. Heads swiveled. The courtroom fell silent. The judge peered over her reading glasses at the teenager now standing in the gallery. "Young lady, this is not a television drama. Please be seated." Aaliyah stepped forward, heart pounding but voice steady. "Your Honor, my name is Aaliyah Daniels. I'm 17 years old and I volunteer at Thompson Legal Aid Clinic. I have evidence that Officer Callaway is being wrongfully accused." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge's mouth twitched. Whether in annoyance or amusement was impossible to tell. "Miss Daniels, while I appreciate your enthusiasm, you are neither a lawyer nor of legal age to represent someone in my courtroom." "I know that, Your Honor." Aaliyah swallowed hard. But I also know that in the state of Georgia, a person has the right to assistance of counsel, which can include paralegals and legal interns working under attorney supervision. I may not be a lawyer, but I've been trained in basic legal research and document preparation. The judge's eyebrows rose slightly. She studied Aaliyah for a long moment, then turned to Ryan. Officer Callaway, are you requesting that this young woman assist in your defense? Ryan looked as shocked as everyone else, but he nodded. Yes, Your Honor, I am. The judge tapped her pen against the bench, clearly thinking. This is highly irregular. Miss Daniels, do you have an attorney who will supervise your work? Aaliyah's confidence wavered. She hadn't gotten that far in her planning. I will, Your Honor. The new voice came from the back of the courtroom. Mr. Thompson stood, briefcase in hand. Leonard Thompson, Your Honor. I'll sponsor Miss Daniels as a paralegal intern and oversee her work on this case. The judge surveyed the strange trio before her. The abandoned police officer, the teenage volunteer, and the aging civil rights lawyer. Then she did something unexpected. She smiled. Well, Officer Calloway, it seems you have quite the defense team after all. She turned to the prosecutor. Any objections from the state? The prosecutor, clearly caught off guard, fumbled for words. Your Honor, this is highly unorthodox. So is abandoning a client on the eve of trial for political reasons, the judge retorted. Motion granted. Miss Daniels may assist in Officer Calloway's defense under Mr. Thompson's supervision. She pointed her gavel at Aaliyah. But young lady, I expect you to conduct yourself with the utmost professionalism in my courtroom. This is not a school project. Yes, Your Honor. Thank you, Your Honor. Aaliyah could barely contain her mix of terror and exhilaration. As court adjourned, Ryan approached her, his expression a mix of confusion and gratitude. Why would you do that for me? Aaliyah met his gaze steadily. Because it's the right thing to do, and because I want to be a lawyer someday, a real one. This is where I start. That evening, they gathered in Mr. Thompson's cluttered office. Ryan sat uncomfortably in a worn leather chair, while Aaliyah organized her notes with methodical precision. First things first, she said, suddenly all business. I need you to tell me everything. Not just what you think is important, everything. I'll decide what matters legally. Ryan blinked, momentarily taken aback by the teenager's commanding tone. Then, slowly, he began to talk. About his history on the force. About the officers he'd reported. About the subtle retaliation that had been building for years. As night fell outside the office windows, an unlikely alliance was forming inside. A discarded cop, a determined teenager, and a wise old lawyer united by one powerful belief. That truth, however inconvenient, deserved its day in court. The Thompson Legal Aid Office had never been so alive at midnight. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Aaliyah hunched over a laptop, surrounded by stacks of police reports and legal precedents. 3 weeks had passed since she'd stood up in that courtroom, and now the full weight of her commitment was settling on her shoulders. You should go home, get some sleep, Ryan said, placing a coffee beside her. He'd taken to bringing her grandmother's homemade sandwiches and caffeinated fuel for their late-night strategy sessions. Can't, she mumbled, eyes fixed on the screen. I found something about Officer Mercer. Ryan leaned over her shoulder. On the screen was a news article from 3 years ago. A police brutality case settled out of court. Officer Jason Mercer wasn't named, but the case number matched one in their files. How did you find this? Ryan asked, voice hushed with surprise. Cross-reference the settlement database with officer badge numbers. Mercer's name was redacted, but the badge number is consistent across reports. Aaliyah pulled up another document. And it's not just once. I've found 3 separate incidents, all settled with NDAs. The department buried them, Ryan murmured, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Just like they tried to bury my complaints about him. Mr. Thompson shuffled in from his office, bow tie askew after 18 hours of work. What have you two found now? Aaliyah explained her discovery, watching the old lawyer's eyebrows rise higher with each detail. Impressive detective work, he said finally. But proving Mercer's history of misconduct doesn't automatically exonerate Officer Callaway. We need direct evidence linking Mercer to your specific incident. The protester, Aaliyah said suddenly. The one Ryan supposedly assaulted. If we could talk to him. Marcus Whitley, Ryan supplied. 22 college student. I've never spoken to him directly. We need to find him, Aaliyah decided. Tonight. It took 3 days of careful work. Marcus Whitley wasn't answering. His phone wasn't at his registered address and had gone silent on social media since filing the complaint. Finally, through a friend of a friend who attended the same university, Aaliyah managed to arrange a meeting at a quiet campus coffee shop. Marcus looked nothing like the angry protester from the videos. In person, he was thin and nervous, his eyes darting around the cafe as if expecting to be ambushed. I appreciate you meeting me, Aaliyah said, sliding into the booth across from him. She'd come alone. They'd decided Ryan's presence would be too intimidating. I'm not changing my statement, Marcus said immediately, voice tight. I just want to understand what happened, Aaliyah replied calmly. The video evidence doesn't match the official report. Marcus stared into his untouched coffee. What does it matter? It's done. It matters because an innocent man is facing charges for something he didn't do. A flicker of something. Guilt crossed Marcus's face. You don't understand the pressure. After I was detained, they kept me for hours. Officer Mercer made it clear what my statement needed to say. And what was that? That Callaway was the one who assaulted me. Marcus finally looked up. But it wasn't him. It was Mercer. He shoved me from behind while Callaway was trying to help another protester. Aaliyah's heart raced. This was it, the testimony they needed. Would you be willing to make an official statement correcting the record? Fear clouded Marcus's eyes. They said they'd charge me with assaulting an officer if I didn't cooperate. I can't risk it. I'm on scholarship. One criminal charge and I lose everything. We can protect you, Aaliyah insisted. No one can protect me from them. Marcus stood abruptly. I'm sorry about your cop friend, but I've got my own life to worry about. He was gone before she could respond, leaving her alone with the weight of a truth that couldn't be used. That night, as Aaliyah walked from the bus stop to her grandmother's house, a black SUV pulled alongside her. The window rolled down to reveal Officer Mercer, his square jaw tight with barely controlled anger. Aaliyah Daniels, he said, her name sounding like an accusation in his mouth. We need to talk. Aaliyah's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression neutral. I don't think we have anything to discuss, Officer Mercer. You've been digging into my record, talking to people about me, making accusations. He stepped out of the vehicle, using his height to loom over her. That stops now. Are you threatening me? She was proud of how steady her voice remained. I'm giving you good advice. Drop this case. Forget about Callaway. Or your perfect record, your college applications, your bright future. All of it dies. Right here, Aaliyah stood her ground. Is that what you told Marcus Whitley? That you'd ruin his life if he told the truth? Something dangerous flashed in Mercer's eyes. He took a step closer, voice dropping to a whisper. You have no idea what you're messing with, little girl. Callaway crossed the line when he reported his fellow officers. We take care of our own problems. By framing innocent people? Mercer's laugh was cold. There are no innocent people in this game, just players and pawns. He returned to his vehicle. Remember what I said. Drop it, or you'll regret it. The SUV pulled away, leaving Aaliyah shaking on the sidewalk. When she finally made it home, Ryan was waiting on her grandmother's porch. Concern etched on his face. Your grandmother called, said you were late. He noticed her pallor immediately. What happened? When she told him about Mercer's threat, Ryan's expression hardened. This ends now. I'm not letting you put yourself at risk for me. It's not just about you anymore, Aaliyah insisted. It's about what's right. What's right is you having a future, not throwing it away on a lost cause like me. Ryan paced the porch, agitated. I've already accepted that my career is over. I can plead to a lesser charge, move away, start over. But you've got everything ahead of you. Why did you become a cop? Aaliyah asked suddenly. The question stopped him. What? Why did you become a police officer? Was it just a job, or did you actually believe in something? Ryan was quiet for a long moment. My dad was killed during a convenience store robbery when I was 12. The officers who responded, they treated my mom and me with such compassion. I wanted to be that for someone else someday. His voice softened. I believed I could make a difference from inside the system. And what happened? Ryan sat heavily on the porch steps. 3 years ago, I reported my partner for planting evidence on a suspect. I thought the department would do the right thing. Instead, they transferred him and made my life hell. Every shift, every call, I was watched, isolated. But I still believed there were good people in the department, people who cared about doing the job right. So you reported other incidents. 2 more times. Each time it got worse. The last one was Mercer. I caught him deleting bodycam footage after roughing up a teenage shoplifter. Ryan's eyes darkened with the memory. The next day, my locker was vandalized. Dead rat inside. Message was clear. But you didn't quit. No, Ryan admitted. Maybe I should have, but it felt like surrendering, letting them win. I thought if I just kept my head down, did my job right. He trailed off. And now? Now I realize some systems can't be fixed from the inside. He looked at her, his expression pained. Which is why I can't let you throw yourself into this fire. Mercer and his friends, they play by different rules. So do I, Aaliyah replied, her resolve strengthening. My father was a civil rights attorney. He taught me that justice isn't a gift. It's something you have to fight for, even when it seems impossible. Before Ryan could argue further, the front door opened. Grandma Elaine stood there, arms crossed, expression stern. I've been listening to you two go back and forth, she said. Ryan, I appreciate your concern for my granddaughter. But Aaliyah makes her own choices. She turned to her granddaughter. And you, young lady, if you're going to fight this battle, you need to be smarter than them. No more walking home alone after dark. The next morning, Aaliyah arrived at the courthouse early for a procedural hearing. To her surprise, Judge Evelyn Washington motioned her to approach the bench after the formal proceedings. Miss Daniels, I'd like a word in my chambers. The judge's office was austere but personal. Law books lined the walls alongside framed photographs of family and what appeared to be civil rights marches from decades past. I'll be direct, Judge Washington said, removing her reading glasses. You've stirred up a hornet's nest with this case. I've received calls from the police commissioner, the DA's office, even a state senator. She fixed Aaliyah with a penetrating gaze. They all seem very interested in making sure a 17-year-old girl doesn't embarrass them in my courtroom. Aaliyah swallowed hard. Are you telling me to back down, Your Honor? The judge's mouth twitched. I'm telling you that you're up against powerful people who don't like their authority questioned. I'm telling you that this case could have consequences for your future. She paused. And I'm telling you that 40 years ago I was you, young, black, and foolish enough to believe that truth alone was enough to change a broken system. What happened? I learned that truth needs strategy to be effective. Judge Washington leaned forward. You've got good instincts, Miss Daniels, and clear eyes, but you need to be prepared, legally and emotionally, for what's coming. These people will try to break you, not just your case. As Aaliyah left the courthouse, the judge's warning echoed in her mind. She was so preoccupied that she almost missed the homeless man sitting on the bench outside, cardboard sign propped. Beside him, Vietnam vet. Anything helps. Something clicked in her memory, the protest footage. This same man had been in the background, perfectly positioned to see the altercation between Officer Mercer, Ryan, and Marcus Whitley. Excuse me. Sir? Aaliyah approached cautiously. Were you at the downtown protest 3 weeks ago? The man, 60s, weathered face, clear eyes despite his disheveled appearance, studied her warily. Might have been. Why? I'm working on a case involving something that happened there. You might have seen it. I see a lot of things, he replied, cryptically. Most people pretend I'm invisible, so I see what they don't want seen. Aaliyah explained the situation, showing him stills from the footage on her phone. Recognition dawned in his eyes. Yeah, I remember that. Bigger officer shoved the kid from behind while the other one was turned away. Classic sucker move. Would you be willing to make a statement about what you saw? The man, who introduced himself as Frank Miller, hesitated. I stay away from police business. No offense, but cops and homeless folks don't mix well. This could help an innocent man. Frank considered this. Let me think about it. I'm usually here or at the shelter on Peachtree. Find me tomorrow. But the next day, Frank was gone. The shelter staff hadn't seen him. For 3 days, Aaliyah searched, increasingly concerned. Finally, she had an idea. We need to use social media, she told Ryan. Frank's out there somewhere. Someone must have seen him. They created a simple campaign. Looking for Frank Miller, Vietnam vet, witness to protest, incident, not in trouble, needed to help right a wrong. They shared Frank's description and photo, taken discreetly during their conversation, across community groups and local forums. Within hours, messages began flooding in. Frank had become something of a fixture in certain neighborhoods, known for his elaborate stories and kind demeanor despite his circumstances. Finally, a shelter worker from across town messaged that Frank had arrived there 2 nights ago, shaken and claiming someone had threatened him. When Aaliyah and Ryan arrived at the shelter, Frank was initially reluctant to speak with them. Eventually, he admitted that a police officer had approached him, warning him to forget what he saw if he wanted to keep sleeping in the city parks unbothered. But I didn't fight in Vietnam to come home and be scared into silence, Frank said finally. I'll tell what I saw on the record. That officer, the big one with the crew cut, he's the one who shoved the kid, not your friend here. With Frank's testimony secured, Aaliyah began preparing their case in earnest. Working late one night at the legal aid office, she discovered something hidden in the police department's internal communication. A report filed the day after the incident, acknowledging confusion about which officer had been involved in the altercation with Marcus Whitley. This proves they knew, Aaliyah exclaimed to Mr. Thompson. They knew Ryan wasn't responsible, but they proceeded with charges anyway. This could be the key to the whole case, the old lawyer agreed, examining the document closely. Where did you find it? It was buried in the interdepartmental memos we subpoenaed. Someone tried to redact the relevant parts, but they did a sloppy job. They made copies immediately, one for their files, one for the judge, one for the court record. The original went into Mr. Thompson's safe. But the next morning, they arrived to find the office door ajar, papers scattered across the floor. The safe was untouched. Mr. Thompson's foresight had protected their crucial evidence. But the message was clear. Someone was desperate to silence them. Security footage from the building's lobby revealed a man in a maintenance uniform entering. After hours, his face was never clearly visible to the camera, but his build matched Officer Mercer's. It's getting dangerous, Ryan said, surveying the ransacked office. Too dangerous. But Aaliyah's resolve only strengthened. They're scared, she said. They wouldn't be trying this hard to stop us if we weren't close to the truth. The security footage was grainy, but damning. A figure in a maintenance uniform, broad-shouldered, confident in his movements, slipped into the legal aid office. At 2:17 a.m., 40 minutes later, the same figure exited carrying a manila folder. That's department-issued footwear, Ryan said, pointing to the screen where they reviewed the footage at the building manager's office. Standard tactical boots. And look at how he moves. That's police training. Checking corners. Maintaining. Awareness of camera positions. Can we prove it's Mercer? Aaliyah asked. Not from this alone. He's careful never to show his face clearly. The building manager, a nervous man with thinning hair, shifted uncomfortably. I've already given you more than I should. If the police ask for this footage... We understand, Mr. Thompson interjected smoothly. We appreciate your cooperation. Perhaps we could get a copy for our records. With evidence of the break-in secured, they returned to the courthouse. Judge Washington called an immediate closed hearing, her expression grave as she reviewed their materials. This is disturbing, she said finally. Breaking into an attorney's office to steal evidence is a serious crime. However, she fixed her gaze on Aaliyah. Proving who did it is another matter entirely, and you should be prepared for retaliation. Retaliation, Your Honor? Aaliyah asked. You're challenging powerful people, Miss Daniels, people who are used to operating without consequences. The judge removed her glasses. You've shown remarkable courage so far, but I need to know you understand what you're up against. This isn't a school debate or mock trial. These people will try to destroy your reputation, your future, perhaps even your safety. Ryan stepped forward. Your Honor, that's exactly why I've been trying to convince Aaliyah to step back. This has gone too far. With all due respect, Aaliyah countered, it's not your decision to make. Judge Washington studied them both, her expression unreadable. I'm scheduling another hearing for tomorrow morning. Just us. No press, no spectators. I want to review all the evidence in this case privately before we proceed further. She turned to Ryan. Officer Callaway, be prepared to testify about the department's internal practices regarding misconduct complaints. That evening, as Aaliyah walked across campus after meeting with Marcus Whitley again, she spotted her best friend Jasmine waiting by the library steps. They hadn't spoken much since Aaliyah took on Ryan's case. Jasmine's father was a community organizer who had been vocal about police accountability. Didn't expect to see you here, Aaliyah said cautiously. Jasmine's expression was troubled. My dad showed me some of the evidence you've uncovered about Officer Mercer. She hesitated. Is it true? They're framing Callaway to protect Mercer? Everything points that way, Aaliyah confirmed. But why are you the one fighting this battle? He's a cop, Aaliyah. A white cop. Why is this your problem to solve? The question hit harder than Aaliyah expected. Because it's wrong, Jazz. If I see injustice and look away just because it's happening to someone who doesn't look like me, what does that make me? It makes you smart, Jasmine fired back. It makes you someone who picks battles that help our community, not theirs. Justice doesn't have a color, Aaliyah replied quietly. My dad taught me that. Your dad fought for black people who couldn't fight for themselves. He fought for what was right, Aaliyah corrected. No matter who it was for. Jasmine's eyes softened. I'm worried about you, eh? People are talking. Saying you've switched sides, that you're being used. Let them talk. It's not just talk. Someone spray-painted traitor on your grandma's mailbox this morning. The news hit Aaliyah like a physical blow. Is she okay? She's fine. Tough as always. She was out there with paint remover before the neighbors even noticed. Jasmine stepped closer. But this is just the beginning. You need to ask yourself if this white cop's career is worth what you're risking. Later that night, alone in her bedroom, Aaliyah stared at the ceiling, Jasmine's words echoing in her mind. Was she making a mistake? Risking too much for someone who, in the grand scheme of things, represented a system that had oppressed her. Community for generations? Her phone buzzed with a message from Ryan. We need to talk. Tomorrow before court. The next morning, Ryan was waiting outside the courthouse, his expression resolute. I'm firing you from the case. Aaliyah blinked. You can't fire me. I'm not your employee. I'm releasing you from any obligation to help me, he clarified. This has gone too far. The break-in, the threats, your grandmother's mailbox. How do you know about that? Jasmine called me. She's worried about you. So am I. Ryan ran a hand through his hair. Look, I appreciate everything you've done more than I can say, but I can't let you keep putting yourself at risk for me. It's not your decision to make, Aaliyah repeated, echoing her words from the judge's chambers. Actually, it is. You're only involved because I accepted your help, and now I'm declining it. His voice softened. You have a future, Aaliyah. College, law school, a career making real change. I can't let my problems derail that. So what's your plan? Plead guilty to something you didn't do? If that's what it takes to end this, yes. Aaliyah felt anger rising in her chest. That's the coward's way out. Ryan flinched as if she'd struck him. Maybe. But it's my choice to make. No, Aaliyah said firmly. Not anymore. This stopped being just about you the moment they broke into our office. The moment they threatened a homeless veteran. The moment they vandalized my grandmother's property. She stepped closer, her voice low and intense. This is about a system that thinks it can bully people into silence, and I will not be silenced. Inside the courtroom, Aaliyah took her place at the defense table despite Ryan's objections. Judge Washington raised an eyebrow, but said nothing about the obvious tension between them. "Officer Callaway," the judge began, "I'd like to hear from you directly about the events leading up to the protest incident." Ryan stood, uncomfortable in the witness box. At first, his testimony was measured, professional, the voice of a man who had testified in court many times before. But as he continued, describing the pattern of retaliation after his misconduct reports, something changed. His voice became raw, emotional. "I believed in the badge," he said, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond the courtroom walls. "I believed we could police ourselves, hold each other accountable. But every time I spoke up, I was the one who paid the price." The district attorney, a sharp-dressed woman named Lisa Bennett, seized on this vulnerability during cross-examination. "Officer Callaway, isn't it possible that your persecution complex has led you to blame others for your own failings? That perhaps you're manipulating this young woman's idealism to save your career?" Ryan's face flushed. "No, ma'am. That's not what's happening here." "Really? Because it seems convenient that you found a teenage crusader to fight your battles. A young black woman, no less. Someone whose youth and race make her a sympathetic figure compared to a white police officer." Aaliyah shot to her feet. "Objection. The prosecution is making inflammatory statements, not asking questions." "Sustained," Judge Washington said sharply. "Ms. Bennett, confine yourself to relevant lines of questioning." The DA smiled thinly. "Of course, Your Honor." She turned back to Ryan. "Officer Callaway, how many times have you been accused of using excessive force during your career?" "Never," Ryan answered firmly. "Not once." "Then how do you explain the complaint filed against you 3 years ago by Jerome Williams?" Ryan's brow furrowed. "I've never heard that name before." "Mr. Williams claims you used unnecessary force during a traffic stop in 2021. The complaint was settled out of court." "That never happened," Ryan insisted. "I've never been the subject of an excessive force complaint." The DA produced a document with a flourish. "I have the settlement agreement right. Here, Officer Callaway. Your signature is on page 3. Aaliyah requested to see the document. As she examined it, something caught her eye. The badge number listed wasn't Ryan's. "Your Honor, this complaint was filed against badge number 5742. Officer Callaway's badge is 5472. She looked up, a flash of understanding crossing her face. They transposed the numbers. This complaint was against Officer Mercer, not Officer Callaway. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Washington held out her hand for the document, examining it carefully. "Ms. Bennett, where did you obtain this document?" "Ethiopia." DA hesitated. "From department records, Your Honor, with the incorrect badge number prominently featured? A mistake that conveniently implicates Officer Callaway instead of another officer?" The judge's voice was dangerously quiet. "I want to know who provided this to you, and I want to know now." As the DA stammered an explanation, the courtroom doors opened. A man in a suit entered, walking directly to the prosecution table. He handed Ms. Bennett a flash drive, whispered something in her ear, then left as quickly as he had appeared. The DA's expression changed as she reviewed the contents on her laptop. "Your Honor, in light of new evidence, the state requests a brief recess to reconsider our position." Judge Washington's eyebrows rose. "New evidence that might exonerate the defendant, Ms. Bennett?" "Potentially, Your Honor," the judge sighed. "This case has seen more twists than a mountain road." "Very well. Court is in recess for 1 hour." In the hallway, Aaliyah confronted Ryan. "You tried to fire me and then just rolled over in there. What happened to fighting for what's right?" Ryan looked exhausted. "I've been fighting for years, Aaliyah. Sometimes it feels like I'm the only one." "Well, you're not alone anymore," she said fiercely. "So stop acting like it." Their conversation was interrupted by a text message on Aaliyah's phone from an unknown number. "Check your email. You'll want to play this in court. A friend." The email contained an audio file, a recording of a conversation between Officer Mercer and another officer, discussing how they had set Ryan up and altered evidence to make the assault charge stick. "Who sent this?" Ryan asked, stunned as they listened. "Someone inside the department," Aaliyah guessed. "Someone who's been watching, waiting for the right moment." When court resumed, the energy had shifted dramatically. The DA looked flustered. Judge Washington noticed the change immediately. "Ms. Bennett, has the state's position evolved during our recess?" "Your Honor, the state is reevaluating certain aspects of our case." "That's not quite a responsive answer," the judge observed dryly. Aaliyah stood. "Your Honor, the defense has received new evidence that directly proves Officer Callaway's innocence and reveals deliberate evidence tampering by department officials." She played the recording. The voices were clear, unambiguous. Officer Mercer and a lieutenant discussing their plan to frame Ryan, laughing about how easy it had been to alter records and pressure witnesses. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The DA's face had gone pale. Judge Washington gavelled for order, her expression thunderous. "Ms. Bennett, am I to understand that the prosecution has been complicit in presenting falsified evidence to this court?" "Your Honor, I had no knowledge. That will be determined in a separate investigation." The judge cut her off. She turned to Aaliyah and Ryan. "This recording raises serious questions about the integrity of this entire case. I'm ordering an immediate investigation into Officer Mercer and all officers mentioned in this recording." Ryan looked stunned, as if he couldn't quite believe what was happening. Aaliyah squeezed his arm, her own heart racing with vindication. As the gallery buzzed with conversation, Judge Washington made one final statement. "This case is not simply about Officer Callaway anymore. It appears we are looking at systemic corruption that demands a complete and transparent review." She fixed her gaze on Aaliyah. "Miss Daniels, it seems your instincts were correct. This court owes you its gratitude for your persistence in the face of significant opposition." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed them. Flashes popped. Questions overlapped in a cacophony of curiosity. Aaliyah felt Ryan tense beside her, overwhelmed by the sudden attention. "You don't have to say anything," she told him quietly. "This is just the beginning." As they pushed through the crowd, Ryan suddenly stopped and turned to her. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "for believing me when no one else would." Aaliyah smiled, exhaustion and triumph mingling in her expression. "That's what justice is supposed to look like." The battle wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for the first time since this ordeal began, the path forward was illuminated not by blind faith, but by the clear light of truth finally breaking through. This is Christine Powell reporting live from the Atlanta courthouse, where an extraordinary legal drama continues to unfold. What began as a simple assault case against a police officer has exploded into allegations of systemic corruption, evidence tampering, and a cover-up that reaches the highest levels of the department. Most remarkably, these revelations have come largely through the efforts of 17-year-old Aaliyah Daniels, who stepped in when Officer Ryan Calloway's attorney abandoned him. Stay with us as this unprecedented story develops. Aaliyah clicked off the television in Mr. Thompson's office, her stomach churning. Since Judge Washington's bombshell ruling 3 days ago, her face had been plastered across every local news channel. Now, national outlets were picking up the story. "The girl who defends a cop," they were calling her. The headline made her uncomfortable, reducing both her and Ryan to simplistic symbols rather than complex people navigating a broken system. "You getting used to being famous?" Mr. Thompson asked, entering with a fresh stack of legal files. "Not really," she admitted. "I just wanted to help one person get justice. I didn't expect all this." "Justice has a way of snowballing," the old lawyer replied. "Once you knock down one lie, others start toppling too." Her phone buzzed. Another interview request, this one from a major cable news network. She'd done one television appearance yesterday, carefully coached by Mr. Thompson on what she could and couldn't say about an ongoing case. The experience had been surreal, sitting under bright lights while a polished anchor asked questions that alternated between softball platitudes and pointed attempts to make her say something controversial. "You should consider doing this one," Mr. Thompson advised, seeing her reluctance. "Public opinion matters in cases like this. The department is already trying to control the narrative." He wasn't wrong. The police union had issued a statement, calling the audio recording alleged evidence of unclear provenance and suggesting it might have been doctored. The department's official position was that they were investigating all aspects of the case, while subtly implying that Officer Callaway had long-standing performance issues. Outside the legal office, Aaliyah's community was fracturing along fault lines of opinion. Some, like her grandmother and Mr. Thompson, stood firmly behind her. Others viewed her defense of Ryan as a betrayal, siding with the oppressor against her own people. Just yesterday, she'd overheard Mrs. Jackson from down the street telling another neighbor, "That Daniels girl's forgotten where she comes from. Her daddy would be rolling in his grave." The words had stung worse than she'd expected. Ryan called as she was leaving the office. "Have you seen the news? They're interviewing every officer who's ever worked with me, digging for dirt." "It's just intimidation tactics," Aaliyah assured him. "They're scared because we're winning. I'm not so sure. My ex-wife called. Said reporters have been hounding her too." Aaliyah paused. "You never talk about your family." A long silence stretched between them. "Not much to say. Karen left 3 years ago, took our daughter Emily with her. Said she couldn't handle being a cop's wife anymore. The stress, the late nights, the worrying." His voice tightened. "After I started reporting misconduct, things got worse. The isolation, the hostility from other officers' families, it was too much for her." "I'm sorry," Aaliyah said softly. "Not your fault. But now she's being dragged back into this mess." The next morning, as Aaliyah entered the courthouse for another hearing, she was startled to see a woman who looked to be in her early 30s standing near the defense table. She had Ryan's same intense blue eyes. "You must be Aaliyah," the woman said, extending her hand. "I'm Karen Callaway, Ryan's ex-wife." "Former ex-wife," Ryan corrected, appearing behind Aaliyah with an expression of bewilderment. "Karen, what are you doing here?" "I saw what's happening on the news." Karen straightened her shoulders. "I know what they did to you after you reported those officers. I watched them destroy you piece by piece. And I let them. I walked away when you needed support. You had to protect yourself and Emily," Ryan said quietly. "Maybe, but I'm here now." Karen turned to Aaliyah. "I have information about threats Ryan received after filing those misconduct reports. Officers coming to our house late at night. Phone calls. Things that were never officially reported because we were too afraid." Before Aaliyah could respond, the courtroom doors opened and Judge Washington took the bench. The day's hearing focused on the admissibility of the anonymous audio recording. The prosecution argued it should be excluded as evidence of uncertain origin, potentially obtained illegally. Aaliyah listened as the DA made her case, noting how her previous confidence had been replaced with a flustered desperation. When it was the defense's turn, Mr. Thompson addressed the court first, then surprised everyone by yielding the floor to Aaliyah. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "The recording came to us anonymously, but its authenticity can be verified through voice recognition software. More importantly, it constitutes protected whistleblower evidence. Whistleblower protections apply to employees reporting misconduct, not anonymous sources," the DA countered. "With respect," Aaliyah responded, "federal whistleblower statutes specifically include provisions for anonymous reporting when the whistleblower fears retaliation. Given what we've already seen in this case, break-ins, threats, evidence tampering, that fear is well-founded." She cited 3 precedent cases where anonymously provided evidence had been admitted under similar circumstances. Judge Washington listened intently, occasionally making notes. "The defense raises valid points," the judge said finally. "The recording will be admitted, subject to authentication by an independent expert." She fixed the DA with a stern look. "And Ms. Bennett, I suggest you consider your office's position in this matter very carefully. The appearance of collusion with a police department to prosecute a potentially innocent officer is not one I imagine your superiors would appreciate." As they exited the courtroom, a commotion erupted in the gallery. A man stood up, pointing at Ryan. "That's him. That's the cop who assaulted me." It was Marcus Whitley, the protester from the original incident. But his demeanor had completely changed. Gone was the nervous young man Aaliyah had interviewed. In his place stood someone performing outrage with practiced precision. "You attacked." "Me! Everyone saw it!" Marcus shouted, playing to the reporters frantically scribbling notes. Ryan froze, stunned by the public accusation. Aaliyah stepped forward instinctively. "Mr. Whitley, you told me personally that Officer Callaway wasn't the one who assaulted you. You said it was Officer Mercer." Marcus's eyes flickered with something, fear, regret, before hardening again. "I never said that. You're twisting my words because you're working for him now." The accusation hung in the air, feeding directly into the narrative that Aaliyah had been manipulated or bought. She felt the sting of whispers and stares as court officers escorted Marcus out. Later, reviewing security footage from the courthouse, they spotted something telling. Officer Mercer standing just outside the courtroom doors when Marcus exited. A brief nod exchanged between them. "They got to him," Ryan said, his voice hollow. "Threatened him again, or offered him something." The DA's strategy became clear in the following days. Unable to exclude the damning audio evidence, they pivoted to attacking Aaliyah's credibility directly. News stories began appearing questioning her motives, her understanding of the law, even suggesting her volunteer work at the legal aid clinic had been orchestrated specifically to position her for this case. The attacks escalated when a classmate from Aaliyah's school gave an anonymous interview claiming she had expressed anti-black sentiments and a desire to be accepted by white authority figures. The accusation was absurd to anyone who knew her, but it spread like wildfire online. Through it all, Callaway became an unexpected ally. Having experienced the department's retaliation tactics firsthand, she helped Aaliyah anticipate and counter each new move. More importantly, she agreed to testify about the pattern of threats Ryan had received after reporting fellow officers. "They'll try to paint me as a bitter ex-wife," Karen warned as they prepared for her testimony. "Make it seem like I'm lying to get back at Ryan for our failed marriage." "Why are you really doing this?" Aaliyah asked when they were alone. "You could have stayed away, kept yourself and your daughter out of it." Karen was quiet for a moment. "When I left Ryan, I told myself it was to protect Emily. But part of me was just tired. Tired of fighting a system that seemed unbeatable." She looked Aaliyah directly in the eyes. "Then I saw you on the news. A 17-year-old girl standing up to that same system without flinching. It made me ashamed of my own fear." In court the next day, Karen's testimony was compelling and raw. She described late-night drive-bys at their home, threatening calls, social isolation from other police families, all after Ryan reported his first misconduct case. "The message was clear," she testified. "Stay silent or suffer." Ryan chose to keep speaking up, and they made us both pay for it. The DA's cross-examination was brutal, suggesting Karen was motivated by guilt or a desire for attention. But Karen remained steady, her answers consistent and her gaze unflinching as she recounted specific incidents, dates, and names. Just as momentum seemed to be shifting in their favor, Aaliyah received a text message during a court recess. Unknown number. "We warned you. Check your email." The message contained a video file, footage from inside the legal aid office showing Aaliyah working late, unaware she was being recorded. The angle suggested a hidden camera had been placed days or even weeks ago. More disturbing were the final frames. Aaliyah walking to her car at night, filmed from nearby bushes, a laser sight briefly appearing as a red dot on her back. "They've been watching me," she whispered, showing the video to Ryan and Mr. Thompson. "They could have—" She couldn't finish the thought. Ryan's face darkened with anger and fear. "This ends now. I'm withdrawing my not guilty plea." "What?" "No," Aaliyah protested. "We're winning. The evidence is on our side." "Evidence won't matter if you're hurt." Ryan's voice cracked with emotion. "They're threatening you directly now. I won't have your blood on my hands." Before she could argue further, there was a commotion in the courtroom. The flash drive, the one containing the damning audio recording of Mercer and the lieutenant, had gone missing from the evidence locker. "How convenient," the DA remarked with barely concealed satisfaction. Perhaps this mysterious evidence never existed at all. But they had underestimated Aaliyah's thoroughness. She had already made 3 backup copies, one with Judge Washington's clerk, one in Mr. Thompson's personal safe, and one uploaded to a secure cloud server with time-stamped verification. The courtroom battle continued for days, each side landing blows and taking hits. The DA called technical experts who suggested the audio might have been manipulated. The defense countered with authentication reports confirming its legitimacy. Then came a bombshell that no one had anticipated. The lieutenant mentioned in the recording, Albert Davis, took the stand as a prosecution witness. A 20-year veteran, with an impressive record, he categorically denied any conversation with Officer Mercer about framing Ryan. Officer Callaway has had a grudge against me since I disciplined him for insubordination 3 years ago, Lieutenant Davis testified. Smoothly. This fabricated recording is simply his latest attempt to undermine my authority. Aaliyah studied him carefully during cross-examination. There was something rehearsed about his denials, a practiced precision to his responses. Lieutenant Davis, she began. In the recording, Officer Mercer mentioned specific details about the protest incident, that Officer Callaway was helping some old lady when the alleged assault occurred. How would he know that detail if he wasn't there? I can't. Speak to what Officer Mercer might or might not know, Davis replied. Let me rephrase, Aaliyah pressed. The bodycam footage shows Officer Callaway assisting an elderly woman at precisely 2:17 p.m., 7 minutes before the incident with Mr. Whitley. But that footage wasn't included in the initial evidence package. It was only discovered during our investigation. So how would Officer Mercer know about it unless he was there watching Officer Callaway? Davis hesitated, just briefly enough to be noticeable. I have no idea. One more question, Aaliyah said, her heart pounding. Have you actually watched all the body cam footage from that day, Lieutenant Davis? Of course. It's standard procedure in cases like this. Aaliyah nodded to Mr. Thompson, who played a clip of the body cam footage showing Ryan's perspective during the protest. Can you identify the elderly woman Officer Callaway was helping in this footage? Davis squinted at the screen. The black woman in the purple sweater. Aaliyah's eyes lit up. The woman is wearing a blue sweater, Lieutenant, and you just testified under oath that you watched this footage. She turned to the judge. Your Honor, Lieutenant Davis couldn't have watched the footage as he claimed. He just proved he's lying about his knowledge of these events. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Washington called for order, her expression stern but with a glint of approval in her eyes. The day ended with the jury visibly shaken by the lieutenant's misstep. As they filed out of the courtroom, Aaliyah could feel the shift in energy, the first real indication that they might actually win. But victory, she was learning, often came with unexpected costs. The first brick came through Grandma Elaine's living room window at 3:17 a.m. The second followed moments later, accompanied by the sickening smell of gasoline and smoke. Aaliyah, get up! Her grandmother shouted, already moving with remarkable speed for a woman her age. Fire! They escaped to the front yard as flames began to consume the porch. Neighbors emerged from their homes in various states of undress, some rushing to help, with garden hoses while others called 911. The fire department arrived within minutes, but by then, the front of the house was severely damaged. As they sat wrapped in blankets provided by paramedics, a police officer approached to take their statement. Aaliyah tensed until she recognized the face. Officer Wilson, one of the few, who had quietly supported Ryan throughout the ordeal. This wasn't random, Wilson said quietly, crouching beside them. Word is Mercer's getting desperate. The DA's office is starting to distance themselves from him since that stunt with Lieutenant Davis backfired. They tried to burn us out, Aaliyah whispered, the reality of it hitting her fully. Her hands began to shake uncontrollably. They could have killed us. Grandma Elaine wrapped an arm around her granddaughter's shoulders. But they didn't. We're still here. Despite her grandmother's strength, Aaliyah couldn't stop trembling. When they were alone in the motel room provided by victim services, she finally broke down, tears streaming down her face as great gasping sobs tore from her chest. I can't do this anymore, she cried, curling into her grandmother's embrace like she hadn't since childhood. They're going to keep coming after us. What if next time? Shh, Grandma Elaine soothed, rocking her gently. You listen to me, Aaliyah Daniels. You come from women who don't quit. Your great-grandmother marched with Dr. King and got attacked by police dogs. Your mother faced down death threats when she integrated her law firm. Your father stood against corruption until his last day. She held Aaliyah's face between her weathered hands. Fear is natural. Giving into it isn't. When Ryan heard about the fire, he disappeared. No calls, no texts, not even Mr. Thompson could reach him. After 24 hours of silence, Officer Wilson called with news. Ryan had cleaned out his apartment and his car had been spotted heading west on I-20. He's running, Wilson reported grimly. Word is he's planning to take a plea deal. Figured if he removed himself from the equation, they'd leave you and your grandmother alone. That's ridiculous, Aaliyah protested. They won't stop just because he gives up. They'll need to make an example of him to scare other officers from speaking out. Using a location tracking app Karen had installed on Ryan's phone during their marriage, they traced him to a motel outside Birmingham. Aaliyah convinced Mr. Thompson to drive her there immediately. The parking lot was nearly empty when they arrived. Ryan's sedan sat in the far corner, packed with boxes and suitcases. As he emerged from his room carrying another bag, Aaliyah stepped into his path. "Going somewhere?" she demanded. Ryan froze, surprise and guilt washing over his face. "Aaliyah, you shouldn't be here." "Neither should you." She stood her ground, arms crossed. "Running away, taking a plea for something you didn't do." "They burned your house down," Ryan said, his voice cracking. "They almost killed your grandmother. Because of me." "No, because of them. Because of a corrupt system that punishes people who stand up for what's right." Aaliyah stepped closer. "If you give up now, what message does that send? That intimidation works? That justice is only for those with power?" Ryan dropped his bag, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "What do you want from me? I'm just one person. I can't change an entire system." "Neither can I. But together with every person brave enough to speak the truth, maybe we can make a dent." She looked him directly in the eyes. "If you give up, every kid watching me loses hope. Every officer afraid to report misconduct sees that silence is safer. Is that the legacy you want?" They stood in silence, the weight of her words hanging between them. Finally, Ryan picked up his bag, but instead of putting it in the car, he carried it back toward the motel room. "I need to unpack," he said quietly. "We have court tomorrow." When they returned to Atlanta, they found the trial landscape had shifted again. News of the arson attack had created a wave of public sympathy. Aaliyah's calm demeanor during a brief press statement, where she explicitly refused to blame the entire police department for the actions of a few corrupt officers, had impressed many. More importantly, evidence of tampering had been discovered. In the official report about the protest incident, digital forensics revealed that the document had been edited after its initial filing, with Ryan's name replacing Officer Mercer's in key sections. Ryan's former partner, James Sullivan, had been silent throughout the proceedings. A 15-year veteran with a spotless record, he had witnessed many of the incidents Ryan had reported but had chosen the safety of silence. Until now. "I can't keep quiet anymore," he told Aaliyah and Ryan when he requested a meeting the night before closing arguments. "Not after what they did to your house. There's a line, and they've crossed it." Sullivan's testimony the next day was devastating to the prosecution. He confirmed that Lieutenant Davis and Officer Mercer had systematically targeted Ryan after his first misconduct report, creating a hostile work environment and eventually conspiring to frame him for the protest incident. "I saw Officer Mercer shove that protester," Sullivan testified, his voice steady despite the career suicide he was committing. "Officer Callaway was 20 feet away, helping another civilian. The whole setup was planned in advance. Mercer even bragged about it in the locker room." The lieutenant's face remained impassive, but Officer Mercer's composure finally cracked. His face flushed with anger as Sullivan detailed the conspiracy, his hand clenching into a fist on the table before him. During cross-examination, the DA attempted to paint Sullivan as a coward who had enabled misconduct through his silence, but Sullivan accepted the criticism without defense. "You're right," he admitted. "I was a coward. I chose my pension over my integrity. I'm here today because I finally realized I couldn't live with that choice anymore. As Sullivan stepped down from the witness stand, his eyes met Ryan's. A silent understanding passed between them, forgiveness offered and accepted in the space of a glance. With Sullivan's testimony bolstering their case, Aaliyah and Mr. Thompson prepared for closing arguments. The night before, they worked late, into the evening, refining their strategy one final time. "You should deliver the closing," Mr. Thompson told Aaliyah, surprising her. "You've earned it." "Are you sure? This is the most important part of the trial, which is exactly why it should come from you." The old lawyer smiled. "This case has never been just about legal arguments. It's about a young woman brave enough to stand up for truth when everyone else looked away. The jury needs to hear directly from you." That night, alone in the hotel room where she and her grandmother were staying until their house could be repaired, Aaliyah wrestled with what to say. Legal arguments and evidence citations filled her notepad, but something was missing, the heart of why this case mattered. As dawn broke, she finally understood what needed to be said. With trembling hands but fierce determination, she wrote the words that would become the foundation of her closing argument. Not just about Ryan's innocence, but about a system that required constant vigilance from those within and without. The morning, as she dressed in her most professional outfit, a simple black dress borrowed from Karen, Aaliyah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Not just for Ryan, but for every person who had ever faced a system too powerful to fight alone. Her grandmother helped pin back her hair, then gripped her shoulders firmly. "Whatever happens today, I am proud of you. Your father would be too." With those words carrying her forward, Aaliyah walked into the courthouse ready for the final battle, knowing that win or lose, she had already changed the landscape of what justice could look like in her community. The courtroom fell silent as Aaliyah rose from her seat. After weeks of testimony, evidence, threats, and revelations, the trial was finally reaching its crescendo. Every bench was packed: journalists, community members, off-duty officers from both sides of the divide. Judge Washington nodded encouragingly as Aaliyah took her position before the jury. For a moment, doubt flickered across her face. She was 17, facing a room of adults who had spent their lives navigating a system she was only beginning to understand. Then she caught her grandmother's eye in the gallery, steady, proud, unwavering, and found her voice. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, her tone clear and measured. "This case began with a simple question. Did Officer Ryan Calloway assault a protester during a demonstration? The evidence has conclusively shown that he did not." She moved from behind the podium, choosing to stand directly before the jury, nothing between them but truth. But as this trial has progressed, we've discovered that the question itself was built on a foundation of lies. The real question isn't about a single moment during a protest. It's about what happens when good people stay silent in the face of corruption. It's about what happens when systems meant to protect us are weaponized against those who speak up. Aaliyah gestured toward Ryan, who sat straight-backed at the defense table. Officer Callaway made a choice that many of us talk about, but few have the courage to make. He reported misconduct. He stood up when it would have been easier and safer to look away. For that, he was targeted, isolated, and ultimately framed for a crime he did not commit. She walked the jury through the evidence methodically: the manipulated report, the witness intimidation, Sullivan's testimony, the forensic analysis of the bodycam footage. Each point built upon the last, constructing an irrefutable case for Ryan's innocence. "The prosecution wants you to believe this is a simple assault case," she continued. "But we've shown it's something far more insidious. A deliberate conspiracy to silence an officer who dared to hold his colleagues accountable." Her voice faltered slightly as she approached more personal territory. "I didn't know Officer Calloway before this case. I had no reason to trust him, no reason to believe his side of the story. Like many in my community, I grew up with complicated feelings about police officers. But this case has taught me something important: that justice isn't about choosing sides based on uniforms or skin color or politics. It's about following the truth wherever it leads, no matter how uncomfortable that journey might be. District Attorney Bennett watched with thinly veiled frustration as Aaliyah connected with the jury. When her turn came for closing arguments, she attempted to redirect the narrative. "Don't be misled by emotional appeals and conspiracy theories," she urged the jury. "This case isn't about whistleblowers or corruption. It's about an officer who crossed the line during a heated moment and now refuses to take responsibility for his actions." She cast doubt on Sullivan's testimony, suggesting he had personal reasons to support his former partner. She questioned the authenticity of the audio recording, despite the expert verification. She even insinuated that Aaliyah, for all her passion and intelligence, was being manipulated by adults with political agendas. "Ask yourselves," she concluded, "who benefits from turning a simple assault case into a crusade against the entire police department? Not the people of Atlanta, not the protester who was assaulted, only Officer Callaway and those who wish to undermine public trust in law enforcement." As the DA sat down, Ryan leaned toward Aaliyah. "She's good," he whispered. "Really good." "So, are we?" Aaliyah replied, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. Judge Washington gave her final instructions to the jury, emphasizing that they must consider only the evidence presented, not speculation or personal feelings about the broader issues raised during trial. As the jurors filed out to begin deliberations, an uneasy silence fell over the courtroom. Outside, a media circus awaited. Reporters shouted questions as Aaliyah, Ryan, and Mr. Thompson pushed through the crowd toward a quiet corner of the courthouse steps. "What happens now?" Aaliyah asked, the adrenaline of her closing argument fading into exhaustion. "We wait," Mr. Thompson replied. "Could be hours, could be days." It was neither. Just 90 minutes later, the bailiff announced the jury had reached a verdict. The speed sent ripples of surprise through the reconvened courtroom. Such a quick decision usually favored one side decisively. But which one? As they rose for the jury's entrance, Ryan reached for Aaliyah's hand, squeezing it briefly. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "thank you for believing in me." Judge Washington addressed the jury. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreperson, a middle-aged black woman with kind eyes and a stern mouth, stood. "We have, Your Honor." "On the charge of assault in the second degree, how do you find the defendant, Officer Ryan Calloway?" The foreperson's voice rang clear in the hushed courtroom. "We find the defendant not guilty." The room erupted. Supporters cheered while others shouted in protest. Journalists rushed for the doors, racing to break the news. Through it all, Ryan stood perfectly still, as if unable to process that the nightmare was finally ending. Judge Washington banged her gavel repeatedly. "Order! I will have order in my courtroom." When the chaos subsided, she continued, her voice carrying undisguised satisfaction. "The verdict has been recorded. Officer Callaway, you are free to go." She removed her glasses, addressing the entire courtroom. "However, this case has revealed deeply troubling conduct within the Atlanta Police Department that cannot be ignored. I am referring all evidence of witness intimidation, evidence tampering, and conspiracy to the District Attorney's Office for immediate investigation." She turned her attention to Aaliyah. "Miss Daniels, your performance in this courtroom has been nothing short of extraordinary. You have demonstrated a natural aptitude for the law and an unwavering commitment to justice. I hope this courtroom sees you again, as a lawyer next time." As the judge left the bench, the reality of their victory finally hit Ryan. He turned to Aaliyah, eyes brimming with emotion, and embraced her without reservation. "You saved my life," he whispered, voice breaking. "You saved my life when no one else would even try." Outside the courthouse steps had become a battleground of competing narratives. Protesters on both sides chanted slogans. News cameras swiveled to capture the drama. In the center of it all stood Aaliyah, Ryan, and Mr. Thompson, surrounded by a small circle of supporters. Grandma Elaine, Karen and her daughter Emily, Officer Sullivan, and a handful of community members who had stood by them throughout the trial. As they descended the steps, the crowd parted reluctantly. Someone shouted "traitor" from the anonymity of the crowd. Another voice called out, Hero. Aaliyah walked through it all with her head high, refusing to be defined by either label. That night, as news channels replayed highlights from the trial, and pundits debated the implications of the verdict, Aaliyah sat quietly on the porch of her aunt's house, where she and her grandmother were staying until their home could be repaired. The adrenaline had long since faded, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion, and something else she couldn't quite name. Pride, her grandmother said, as if reading her thoughts. She handed Aaliyah a mug of hot chocolate and settled into the chair beside her. That feeling you can't place. It's pride in knowing you did something that mattered. I just wanted to help one person, Aaliyah murmured. Sometimes that's how the biggest changes start. Grandma Elaine patted her hand. Get some rest, baby. Tomorrow's going to be busy. Her grandmother wasn't wrong. By morning, Aaliyah's phone was overflowing with messages, interview requests, congratulations, and something unexpected. Emails from 3 top law schools expressing interest in her application. But I haven't even applied yet, she told Mr. Thompson when she visited his office later that day. I'm still in high school. The old lawyer chuckled. Turns out conducting yourself with brilliance in a nationally televised trial is better than any admissions essay. He handed her a stack of envelopes. These came for you too. Scholarship offers from civil rights organizations. They're all eager to invest in the future of the girl who defended a cop. Spring sunshine bathed the newly repaired porch of Grandma Elaine's house as Aaliyah sorted through college brochures. 3 months had passed since the verdict, and the media frenzy had finally begun to subside, though her face still occasionally appeared in news segments about police reform and accountability. The trial's aftermath had rippled through Atlanta and beyond. Lieutenant Davis and Officer Mercer had been suspended pending an internal investigation that had already uncovered evidence of systemic misconduct. The police commissioner had resigned under pressure. A civilian review board, long advocated for by community leaders, was finally being established with real oversight powers. Ryan had declined reinstatement to the force, choosing instead to work with a newly formed community initiative aimed at rebuilding trust between police and the neighborhoods they served. He visited weekly, sometimes bringing Emily along, the 7-year-old having decided that Aaliyah was now her personal hero. Columbia sent another package, Grandma Elaine called from inside the house. That's the 3rd one this month. They really want you. Aaliyah smiled. The attention from prestigious universities still felt surreal, as did the scholarship offers that would make attending them possible. She had options now, paths forward that she'd only dreamed about before. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine. Turn on Channel 7, they're talking about the reforms. Aaliyah rushed inside to find her grandmother already watching. On screen, the mayor stood at a podium announcing a series of policy changes for the police department: mandatory body cameras, enhanced de-escalation training, and a clear process for officers to report misconduct without fear of retaliation. The Callaway case exposed serious flaws in our system, the mayor admitted. We're committed to addressing them transparently and comprehensively. The camera cut to Ryan, seated among community leaders at the press conference. He looked different, now the haunted expression replaced by quiet determination. When asked to comment, he spoke briefly about the importance of accountability on all sides. True justice requires courage, he said, words that Aaliyah recognized from their many conversations. The courage to admit when systems fail, and the courage to work together to fix them. As graduation approached, Aaliyah found herself busier than ever. Besides her regular schoolwork and college preparations, she had begun speaking at local high schools about civic engagement and the legal system. Students packed auditoriums to hear her story, asking questions about everything from constitutional rights to how she'd found the courage to stand up in that courtroom. I was terrified, she always admitted honestly. But some things are more important than fear. The day before graduation, Ryan visited with an unexpected gift, a sleek silver pen in a velvet box. This is the pen the judge used to sign the order dismissing my case, he explained. Judge Washington gave it to me afterward, said it was a reminder that justice sometimes requires a steady hand in shaky times. He placed it in Aaliyah's palm. "I want you to have it." "Ryan, I can't, please," he insisted. "Use it to sign your law school acceptance. Use it to write your first legal brief. Use it to change more lives." His eyes were sincere. "You gave me back my future. This is just a small token of what that means." Graduation day dawned bright and clear. Aaliyah stood before the mirror in her bedroom, adjusting her cap and the honor cords draped around her neck. From downstairs, she could hear voices gathering, her grandmother entertaining early arrivals. At the ceremony, Aaliyah was surprised to find herself called to the podium. The principal explained that the scheduled valedictorian had graciously stepped aside, feeling that Aaliyah's voice needed to be heard today. Standing before her classmates, many of whom had watched her trial unfold on classroom televisions, Aaliyah felt a strange sense of completion. The girl who had whispered, "This is wrong," in an empty courtroom months ago was gone. In her place stood a young woman who had discovered her voice and her purpose. "We're taught that justice is blind," she began. "But true justice isn't blind, it's clear-sighted. It sees past uniforms and skin color and political divisions to the humanity underneath. It recognizes that systems are only as good as the people who have the courage to hold them accountable." As she spoke, she caught sight of familiar faces in the audience. Mr. Thompson dabbing at his eyes with a handkerchief, Ryan and Karen sitting together with Emily between them, Officer Sullivan in the back row. Even Judge Washington had come, her judicial dignity momentarily set aside as she applauded Aaliyah's words. But it was her grandmother's face that Aaliyah sought in the crowd. The woman who had raised her to speak truth, even when her voice shook, who had held her through moments of doubt and celebrated every victory. "My grandmother taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear," Aaliyah told the hushed audience. "It's the decision that something else is more important." When she returned to her seat amid thunderous applause, the principal whispered, "That's my baby," echoing Grandma Elaine's proud words. 3 months later, Aaliyah sat in her dorm room at Columbia Law School, surrounded by textbooks and the organized chaos of a first-year law student's life. The transition from high school senior to college freshman had been swift and challenging, but she was thriving in the rigorous environment. A knock at the door revealed Ryan, in town for a conference on police reform where he was a featured speaker. "Just wanted to see how you're settling in," he said, taking in the law books, case briefs, and the framed newspaper headline on her wall. "Teen hero fights injustice and wins." Below it hung a handwritten note from Ryan. "You defended me. Now go, defend the world." "It's intense," Aaliyah admitted, "but I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Ryan nodded, understanding in his eyes. "The conference organizers asked me an interesting question yesterday. Why do I think your defense of me resonated with so many people? Why did it become such a national story? What did you tell them?" "That it wasn't just about a black teenager defending a white cop, though that made for convenient headlines. It was about someone standing up when it would have been easier to look away. Someone saying this is wrong, and then doing something about it." He smiled. "That's a story people need right now." As they walked across campus, Ryan mentioned that several of his former colleagues had begun speaking out about misconduct they'd witnessed, inspired by Sullivan's testimony and the changes that had followed. "Your case created a blueprint," Aaliyah observed. "Showed them it was possible to tell the truth and survive." "Our case," Ryan corrected gently. They paused by the law school building, where Aaliyah needed to return for an evening seminar. The autumn sun cast long shadows across the historic campus, a place that had once seemed as distant as the moon to a girl from Atlanta with big dreams and limited resources. "When I first stood up in that courtroom and said I will defend him, I had no idea what I was starting," Aaliyah admitted. "I just knew I couldn't stay silent." "Sometimes that's all it takes," Ryan replied. "One voice that refuses to be quiet." As they parted ways, Aaliyah climbed the steps to the law school, Judge Washington's words echoing in her mind. "I hope this courtroom sees you again, as a lawyer next time." She would be back, she knew. Not just in that Atlanta courtroom, but in any place where truth needed a voice and justice required a defender. With each step forward, she carried with her the legacy of that pivotal moment. The day a 17-year-old girl stood up and changed the course of not just one life, but many. The pen Ryan had given her rested in her pocket, a tangible reminder of promises kept and battles yet to come. One day, she would use it to sign her oath as an attorney, pledging to uphold the ideals she had already begun to embody. Until then, she would study. She would learn. She would prepare, because the world needed defenders, and she had already proven she was ready to answer that call. What would you risk to defend the truth when everyone expects you to stay silent? Like and subscribe for more stories that challenge us to find courage in unexpected places.